everybody. I'm Chad Zellinger. In the tile, I think next to me is Dr. Michael Albertson. And we want to thank you for joining our Sip and Share, I have to do this, our Sip and Share webinar series with CMEA. Hopefully you brought a tasty beverage of your choice this afternoon while we sit back and we listen to Dr. Albertson speak with us about how every student is a composer. Composing is for every student, right?
Yep.
So that's our welcome. If you would do us all a favor, we're going to use the chat. We're going to use the chat window. First, if you can go ahead and type your name in and where you are in the state of California, or I know I invited a few folks from outside of the state. So if you're not from California, let us know where you're from. So go ahead and give us your name, even though we can see your name, but give us your name and where you're located. The chat box today will be available for questions at any time. So if Michael is enthralled about something and you had a quick question that came, and go ahead and jot it down. I'll be kind of managing those questions offline, and I'll keep track of those so that we have a period after the presentation to have some Q&A with Michael. So please feel free to use the chat box that way. All right. So we're happy on behalf of CMEA. We're happy to introduce Dr. Michael Albertson today. Let's see. Dr. Albertson is the founding music department chair at the Geffen Academy at University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. The first 14 years of his career were in New York City, 11 of which he taught in public schools in Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. Michael earned his doctorate in music and music education from the Teachers College, Columbia University in 2015. Michael begins his term this year as our innovations representative on the CMEA State Board of Representatives. While he enjoys the weather in Los Angeles, he very much dislikes that the ground can shake at any time. Welcome to California, Michael. Okay, so let's see, Michael, could you go ahead and start our slide deck?
Will do. Thank you very much, Chad. Here we go.
All right.
So 1 second there. I think I have it. Oh boy. Okay, here we go. We're good. Okay.
And all right, yeah, so you're here at Sip and Share this Friday. Go ahead and advance that slide. Great. So these are some slides that we want to present at the beginning of each one of our webinars. We want to make sure that the children, our students, that have the adult permission before accessing any online resources, that students and families do not provide any identifying information to gain access to those resources, free or paid. I think there's one right before that. Go back one. There we go. Great. So NAFME advocates for equitable access to instruction. So as we begin curating materials to implement and to continue using distance remote teaching and learning, we want to make sure that universal access, our students have that for devices and internet services. And as we are here this afternoon, we're providing learning opportunities and time for educators like ourselves to design these environments, tasks, and assessments. Providing opportunities for students to learn how to succeed with online instruction in tandem with an appropriate learning management system, however your district deploys that through Canvas, Schoology, Google Classroom. Over at our parent organization at their website, there have been numerous resources at our disposal during this time of unprecedented teaching and learning in the history of our lives. So please feel free to head over to nafme.org and to check out those resources. All right, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Michael Albertson.
Thank you so much, Chad, and thank you everyone for being here on a Friday afternoon. Really appreciate your time, and let's dive right in. So my presentation is Every Student is a Composer, and Lisa Crawford, who's on the call, is my colleague there, my wonderful colleague, and we run primarily a creativity and composition curriculum. And our tagline for our program is every student is a musician, every student is a composer. So took the second half of that and want to share a little bit of the things we've been thinking about over there with you. So just to give you a quick overview of what to expect, I'll go over some of the philosophical, sort of the backings of why a composition program. If I had my academic resources and research journals, which are all locked up at work, I would have given you citations with years and page numbers, but this will be more from my own teaching experience based. I want to provide a lot of shared composition ideas that I've been using in the classroom that hopefully are things you can use or adapt in any way you see fit. Assessment, of course, especially when you bring a different type of program into a school. It may have other teachers, administrators, parents wondering how you're assessing the work. So there's definitely ways to do that. And then also how school events change. This isn't your normal concert anymore. Sit in the audience for the performing groups, which I've led many groups like that and been a part of myself. And while you still could do something like that, we've tried to think of some new ways to share out our student work. And then it says at the end, participant sharing Q&A, but if you at any point would like to jump in with a question, please feel free. It turns out I actually cannot see the chat box when I'm in full screen, so I'll look to Chad with a
got you covered.
Feel free to interrupt me, so as we go. And then just so the purpose of why do I think this work is important and worth sharing, I think there's a lot of benefits to incorporating composition and songwriting. I hope that people, again, can take some ideas with them. I'm pretty sure 95% of the ideas I have been adapted from other people that I've heard present or things I've read. And, but I also hope that this doesn't just apply during remote learning now, but hopefully when we all see each other in person again, that these are things you can take back to the physical spaces in which you teach. And then also I'm always game to get new ideas from colleagues in the profession. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So first part, why composition? I think this is, for me, was, as I say at the top, recognizing a problem of practice. I have a very traditional music background in that I started playing trumpet when I was in 4th grade and did the bands, choir thing, and just loved every minute of it. And then in high school was, on the weekends, had my own rock band that would play in Albany, New York. And we were doing that. And I noticed that the musicians I played with in school were not the musicians I was playing with on the weekends. And wondering, where's that gap? Why what I do on the weekend isn't welcome in the school space? And then I also started wondering how what I learned in the school space can be applied to the rock music I played outside. But I never had an opportunity in my secondary school education, be it middle school or high school, to compose. I think I've been most inspired by visual artists and visual art teachers. So many of my friends in New York and here in Los Angeles, I've connected with people who are visual artists. I love the way they look at the world, and I love that they're always aiming towards some creative process that they're in the middle of trying to achieve. And I just started thinking, gosh, I wonder if I had that opportunity, or if I could encourage that in my students, how our work might change. And, I was in New York teaching for probably 4 or 5 years. I was in my mid to late 20s in New York. And one day I woke up with this just awful feeling. And I just said, gosh, I'm not a musician. I teach it, I play it, I practice it. But I really don't feel like a musician. At what point am I supposed to feel like a musician? I can play pieces. I was doing jazz gigs and it was cool. But I just didn't feel like I had that, what I expected to feel as like a music person, certainly. And then, in my first 9 years in New York City, we're at one high school in Eastern Queens, and I had a great time there and tried to change what program offerings we had, but it really still went in the more way of jazz and guitar, and that worked at that time for that setting. But looking back, I go, gosh, I did not offer meaningful experiences to compose for my students in those first 9 years. It was very much like, here, compose a 4-bar example. And hopefully some of them got something out of it, but there certainly wasn't the flexibility and chance to bring personal style and experience into these projects that in the years since I'm hoping that I'm allowing for. So composition can definitely be an afterthought in high school music classes. We all know if we're in a performance ensemble especially, it's like, gosh, the concert's coming up. When the heck are we going to get to composing? We always have that nice month. I know my concerts in New York were always either late December, early January, and you get those like 3 weeks at the end of January before sort of the second half of the year starts. You're like, okay, let me try to get everything else in I wanted to get in. And I know many people are doing it better than I was with that. We, as musicians, we always look up to, when I hear about whether it be classical or jazz or hip hop or anything, I always talk to musicians and music educators, and everybody talks about original artists. People talk about Thelonious Monk, about how great and original he was, and Ella Fitzgerald, how wonderful she was. And yet, if we're not allowing students to bring that originality and creativity to us, I feel like there was a disconnect there that I started recognizing. Simply put, composition is the work of musicians. We do lots of things. We practice. We play established repertoire, and we try to do better, become better interpreters of existing music. We're historians. We study theory. We're community musicians. But writing music is the work of musicians. That's what we do. And also equity and student voice. I found it hard to navigate in a ensemble setting, playing music that was meaningful to students without it just sort of seeming like I was checking off the boxes, like, okay, have I picked different types of music and this and that? And even though I thought maybe I was going better, sometimes it just wasn't connecting with the students, and allowing students to use platforms that are meaningful to them, dive into music that's meaningful to them, I think speaks to issues of equity and student voice. So what I put in here definitely sometimes heard, because I think like all of you who are joining this webinar on a Friday afternoon are, excited about the work we all do. But sometimes I've heard from people I've worked with in the past, or different colleagues at different spots along the way. What if I don't have enough time? We just don't have enough time for composition. I totally get it with the pressure for performances. Classes are too large. We don't have enough room. Yes, I admit, teaching a class of 15, one of my classes now at 15, it's a lot easier than it was when I taught a class of 50 at the beginning of my career. That would be a lot tougher. Students don't know enough theory to compose. Like, how can they compose if they don't know the basics of theory? And then also just sort of this feeling that I think I was having too, I don't know enough about composition. So I think to these, I would suggest how I started making that change was I just made it a priority. I just said, okay, this is where we're going. Sort of like, in some ways, putting my eggs all in one basket, just like, let's do it. Let's invest in this. And it's nerve-wracking. And I've, had doubts along the way. And like, is this the right thing to be doing? But when I hear the work that students are producing, when I hear the feedback from my colleagues and administration and the parents in our community about how proud they are of our students and what they've created, it feels like it was the right decision. Classes are too large. I mean, noisy music rooms are awesome. Most people don't like visiting mine or Dr. Crawford's room. They like the idea of visiting our room until they hear all the sound. And then they're like, why is it so noisy? Well, they're creating. They're all creating at the same time. They're creating something different. So noisy music rooms are awesome. Students don't need to know enough theory to compose. They don't need to. There's ways for them to jump into composition. Of course, there's ways to roll out theory and things we want to, concepts we want to get to our students. So that's important. But any student can jump in and compose. And I don't know enough about composition. Yes, you do. We're all professional musicians. That was the doubt I had. Maybe you've experienced that doubt. We know more than we think we do. Our students are hungry for information. And Chad and I were talking the other day that, students teach us things all the time too. And I think being open to what the students have to share, and just being able to say, I don't know that. Students come in with some digital music they do and show me things, and I'm like, that is way over my head. So, but then my next question is, how did you do that? So always looking to expand. So yeah, every student is a musician, and every student brings expert knowledge into our classrooms. I feel like more so than almost any other subject, right? Everybody has an opinion about music. Everybody knows who they like to listen to, why they like to listen to. And honestly, when I listen at even say faculty meetings and I hear colleagues in other departments, I swear they know more about music than I do. They listen to way more music than I do. There's no way I could listen to that much music. And I think it's just absolutely wonderful. So I think everybody in our teachers and students know a lot more about music than they think they do. Composition in its most basic form is just organization of sound, and everybody is capable of that. So we can all organize sound. Of course, there's different levels and different traditions, but at its most basic, it's just organizing sound. And then I was like, well, therefore, if they can organize sound, they can all be composers, songwriters. So I think, and I'm just going to trying to move this screen there because I can't see the top of mine. The benefits of teaching composition in music classroom. My number one is problem solving. I think this drives everything. Giving students, and I have some specific prompts, and I've also included some student samples of work so you can hear sort of how they've turned out from the prompts. But a lot of times I don't give students too many details of things that I want. I'm certainly have a learning objective and whatever the new topic we're discussing and how to incorporate that into the work. But one example could be everyone in the group needs to play a different instrument, and they run into the problem quickly. Well, only some of us know this instrument and we don't know 4 different instruments. So then my next question is, great, how do you figure that out? And there could be a YouTube tutorial, or go see someone who knows, or come ask me. There's ways of solving those problems for them. We get to apply music theory and other musical concepts however we want. And this can be at any level of composition in any style or genre. This isn't just popular songwriting. This could be composing in classical forms or writing jazz standards or jazz standard inspired music. It differentiates, there's automatic differentiation. So as you all know, when you have ensembles, it's so challenging when you have the student who's taken lessons for 7 years sitting next to the student who just wants to play this instrument more than anything and has been playing for 3 months. But then you have 40 other people in the room, and how the heck are we going to get this to work? And, we put in lots of extra time writing alternate parts and giving lessons and doing what we can. But I think when you introduce composition, it automatically differentiates and can meet students where they are. And that speaks to the next thing. They build up their current knowledge. Students are now creatives, is a term I stole from Amanda Seales. She's a comedian and podcast host and many other things. I like that term, as creatives, as people who are actually creating something new. We get to provide more qualitative feedback. So much of my feedback now is just walking around the classroom, checking in with students, listening, play that for me one more time. Have you considered this? And assessment, which we'll talk about later more formally, is just more rolling and more constant. And then there's always room for improvement. So wherever students are, it's not like they just met the bar for finishing the assignment. There's always some way they can take their composition to a deeper level, or expand a song, or add harmonies. There's always somewhere to dive deeper as we go. And I click there, oops. And then composition ideas. Let's get into some things we can, these are some things I've used in the past, and I hope are some things you might want to take with you and adapt. So, but I think there's some things we need to think about. What is your class setup? Roster, time, and space. Several years ago, I was in a middle school in Brooklyn where I had a $150 budget for 200 students for the entire year. And, I worked with Little Kids Rock to get some instruments and attended some of their seminars. And we started just sharing keyboards. And then students started recording or writing songs together, and I would record them just on my iPad. And then they would design album covers. So there was a way to do it. My students now have a Pro Tools set up in our school. So we work with Pro Tools, but a lot of students still like to record on their laptops. If, they can even record on their phones, of course. So what materials do you and your students have access to? That's a big thing. And we also keep staff paper in our room too. So it's whatever. I think Dr. Crawford and I like to create spaces where students come in and almost like having a palette full of paint can go, I have all these different things I can do. So if you're feeling like you want to write 5-line notation one day, cool. And if you want to do something digital the next day, it's there for you as long as we're able to provide it. And then also, what's the purpose of it? Is it I would say, you know, like I've tried in the past when I just incorporated composition, but I didn't feel like it had much meaning. I felt like I was just checking a box, like, okay, I've composed with the students, good, I was supposed to do that. But once I started feeling like this was the right thing to do for my students and for my program, to help me set a purpose. So these are three things. These are three actually quite specific things that have worked for me and are driving almost all my work currently for my ninth graders. We're getting ready for final projects somewhat soon. And when I look back over the whole year, they come in with tons of different experience levels. Some had never taken a music course before. Some had years of private instruction. But regardless of how much experience they have and whatever genres they have, there's still more of reviewing they can do. You know, we all know they can say, oh yeah, I know that. And then you ask them and it's a little shaky, and that's great. That's what we're there to help them do and get better at. But I just work on form, just A and B, contrasting forms, contrasting sections rather. So you have music, much music has different sections to it. If you could just get that idea of A and B and there's two different parts, then we can expand to more complicated things. We start the year writing ostinato compositions. Can you just write, and then we can call them riffs or hooks or anything like that. Can you write a short bit of music that repeats over and over again that holds your song together? And then the other thing I think we focus on right away is contrasting textures. So if I'll say to the students, look, if the piano player is playing something super busy up here, you might want to think of something different for the guitar player. The guitar player might want to lay back and not play as many notes. Or if the drum beat's super complex, how does the bass line fit into that? So when I look at these three things, I'm not even dealing with pitch yet. I mean, I know they do deal with pitch, certainly creating an ostinato and rhythm. But these are the three musical concepts we start with, and then everything else comes later. So at the beginning of the year, again, there's a lot of organized atonality, and that's okay. So here's a prompt that I used this year. This was, I believe this was our first prompt of the year. And also let me give you a shout out on the bottom left side of the screen to our hashtag, less noise, more signal. So if you're on social media, you can use that hashtag for us. Apologies, I didn't get it in earlier. I will get it in before the end. So in a group of four, compose and perform a piece of music that adheres to the following guidelines. Has two contrasting sections, each at least 16 measures in length. Each musician performs a unique ostinato. Each student must use a different instrument, or you can use your voice and sing. And when you perform it, it must be performed with a steady beat. And that's not a lot of metrics for a live performance, but it is also the first time that a lot of students are performing in front of other people. So I feel like if you can lock in with the steady beat, and we're dealing with stage fright and a lot of other things like that, it's a good entry point. I don't unfortunately have any recordings of this one because this was a live thing that I didn't have recorded, but for some of these digital ones, we do. So here's another prompt. And I think this will be posted to the CMEA website. We'll have the link of this webinar afterwards. So if people want to go back and see anything specifically and pause, you can feel free to do it. So digital or acoustic, depending what you're feeling that day and what kind of musician you are and what you want to write. We do a big unit on protest music. So that's something I've been looking into for about the last decade. I've been bringing to all my schools. I feel like protest music works across genre boundaries and really connects with students in many different ways. So they had to compose what we call implicit protest piece. So implicit and explicit. Explicit would be that it's very obviously clear that this is a protest piece and what the topic is about. So it doesn't have to do with like explicit lyrics. It's more about, is your message explicit to the listener? When we listen to, gosh, let me think of one off the top of my head. Of course, I'm gonna fumble under the pressure. But War by Edwin Starr. War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. You pretty much know what his message is. I would call that an explicit protest song. And then you could have something like Fables of Faubus by Charles Mingus. There is a version that exists with lyrics, but the one on Columbia Records on the album, if you didn't know that that was a protest piece against the governor of Arkansas, if you didn't know the history behind that, you could listen to the piece and not necessarily know it. So that's what we talk about by an implicit protest piece. So something that doesn't have words or something that gives away our message and there is a little mystery behind it. So this is that assignment. Step 1, choose topic of current event that you connect with. Write 8 lines of a poem, lyrics, or a narrative to express your thoughts. So like I just said, these don't have words, but I want them to use something that they're comfortable with, words to get their ideas out. And then they have to find a way of translating those words into an instrumental melody. And we will take time to go over what that looks like and how different composers have done that, and listen to pieces that are supposed to convey different messages or images, and what musical elements do they use. So that's our prep work. So the words become the melody, and meaning, like, if they can set the words to this song and then sort of just take the lyrics out, they have their melodic arc, and then the feeling of the words, what kind of emotions do you want, become the texture and the harmony. So again, there's my A and B section, 8 bars each. And then there's also this example, which is a little different. And this was a student who came in with a lot of experience for private study on violin. And this is, you'll hear the violin incorporated into this digital composition. And then this would be a full protest song. So this would be including lyrics, so an explicit protest song. In a group, compose and record an original protest song. It must have words. Everyone must contribute to the piece, whether it's sung or spoken word, however you choose to record it. And this is a full-length song. And I just put in the caveat, according to historical trends of the genre in which you compose. I think I would say, and other people who I know focus on composition a lot would suggest, that students often write outside of genre boundaries. They just create music. But as a starting point, we can fall back on historical forms of these pieces, whether it be like verse, chorus, or a 32-bar swing tune or something like that. I will attempt to play this one example of this. If Chad, you just give me the thumbs down after 10 seconds if it's not going well, and then again, I apologize for that. Here we go. That is a group that uses, you probably still can't make out the words, and I actually told the group I can't either, but I think that's part of the effect of the song that they want. This is a group that really likes to use digital effects and distortion, and the piece was them protesting about their frustration at, they feel like they've inherited a lot of problems that those of us that have come before them should have solved by now, and they feel like they're being handed off big problems, say climate change and things that they have to deal with. So that was the inspiration for that song for them. And then I did not include an audio version of this because I don't want any copyright violation with Drake. But students work on some ear training skills, doing some transcriptions of the melody for Hotline Bling, which of course now is a really outdated song. And my students let me know that very quickly. But it still works really well for this project, so we stuck with it in this case. But we do a juxtaposition unit where we take genres that couldn't really on the surface seem more different and then try to find commonalities in them. So our mashup here was Drake, Hotline Bling, and we also were studying Gregorian chant at the time. So we were looking at chant melodies and chant notations, and Drake's melody for this song actually really lends itself to chant notation and the arc of the melody. So we did a transcription. We tried to emulate chant notation best as they could. But then they had a digital assignment, which was to make a remix of this, a mashup. So they had to take the verse from Hotline Bling, transcribe it by ear, then record it into whatever digital program they were using, compose an original B section, harmonize it in fourths or fifths to sort of give it an older sound, and then add digital tracks on top of that. And that assignment changes a little bit each year, and we'll definitely update the song in the future. And then these are other resources that I found. I know that if we crowdsourced amongst all of us, we would have just a huge set of resources we could use, but these are some of the things I've been using. Beatbox, a 7th grader showed me this a few years ago. Just, you can make Mario Brothers and Atari sounding type music, which is, I guess, retro at this point, but it's awesome and the students have had a lot of fun with it. Chrome Music Lab has been good for some basic concepts. We talked about mashups. We try writing different genres, soundscapes, where I've given them an image of, say, a picture of the Adirondack Mountains in New York, and how do you construct a 1 or 2 minute piece that's inspired by this image, turning sort of image into sounds. We work a lot on skills and recording and production. We have a songwriting and recording class and a music production class. And then also 30-second jingles. My students just handed them in yesterday, so I have yet to hear them, but they're writing 30-second jingles for made-up companies that they made up. And then assessment. Does assessment change with the composition curriculum as opposed to, say, performance? I mean, yes and no. The essence of the work is different, but I still think it's introducing new skills and seeing how, I think for me, I found it allows me to individualize the instruction more. I can sort of keep track of where students are in their arc of like what music theory they know. I don't have to set time aside for performance, check-ins anymore. It's just while they're composing, I can go around and have conversations with them or ask them to demonstrate things, and it doesn't eat up class time that other students are waiting for them. I found that it's definitely more upfront planning. And I mean, I think all of us as teachers, we put a lot of time up front, but for composition, I feel like the time goes in at the beginning, getting everything ready and making sure the assignment is clear and the students have what they need. But then from then on, it's less in the front of the room teaching and more just walking around and checking in and seeing how we can help students. And then of course the expectations must be clear and measurable. I'm pretty sure I have said be creative at one point in my career, which doesn't help anybody. Like, just be creative. It'll, express yourself. That didn't help anybody. So they can create things and we can still ask to see specific music skills as we go. So with in terms of assessment, things that are working for me, soft deadlines, certainly students have to still hand in work by the end of trimesters and they get grades, of course. But I'm trying not to say an assignment is due today, and which it is, and a few students let me know, I need some extra time on that. That's fine. We're gonna go on with the next work and you can still hand in this for full credit, but just, work is gonna pile up a little bit. what I think that's good for is it gives them target dates to keep online, themselves on target for getting all their work done. But for the student who's like, I'm really stuck and I got writer's block and I don't know what to do, it gives them that sort of generous extra time without taking away points for them or feeling like they just have to write something they don't feel good about. We use self-assessments, peer assessment, educator assessments. Dr. Crawford and I will stop into each other's room and just hear students playing pieces and give them feedback. We use rubrics, and certainly assessment through conversation, just speaking to the students, having them explain what they did and why they did it. And I would say also I use minimal guidelines, as you could see from some of those prompts. It doesn't mean that I don't have learning standards for them, but I try to make the learning standard the incorporation of whatever the new thing is. But then try not to limit it in too many other ways so they still have the creativity to run with it the way they want it. And then how do we share this out with our community? It's very different than things we've tried, or certainly in my schools in the past. We've had a coffee house every year, so that's still a performance, a little more casual. Sometimes students do original work, sometimes they play cover songs. We do morning concerts on Friday mornings when we were in the building, and now we send out emails. So we share student compositions on Friday mornings. The thing, I'm reading Chad's message here. Got it. Cool. I will get to that. Thank you. I think, and Dr. Crawford can speak to this too, I'm sure, our songwriter and composer symposium, I think, is the thing we're most excited about, where our entire event is students in different classes sharing out what they've composed. We sometimes have laptops at desks with headphones, and parents just walk around to hear what they've done, and the student talks them through it. We had a panel discussion with the songwriting and recording class where each band would come to the front and I would interview them, almost sort of like a Rolling Stone kind of interview or something. And they got to talk about their process in front of their parents. They performed pieces that were complete and pieces that were incomplete, but everybody knew that was the thing in the front and had a lot of positive reception. And we were able to do 2 in person this year before we went remote. And then we do an album release party for the songwriting and recording class. They each write 5 or 6 songs, an EP worth of music on their own. And we have an album release party, and they do album covers and try to get some cool lights or screen effects to make the day feel a little special. So I'm looking here. We had a question about the term transcription. So like, it's like I would transcribe a jazz solo, just like listening to it over and over and then write it out. In staff notation is the way I would use that in context.
Kirk, did you want to clarify that, or did you want to?
That's all I saw in my text on my phone. I'm not seeing the chat.
That's okay. Go ahead, Kirk.
Basically, yeah, thanks. Basically, during the part of it where you were talking about there was no notation, I was just confused about if there's. I didn't know what that meant. It's several screens ago, but it was one of the projects that you had them doing, and you said, I think it was the Bling, Forever Bling. Forgive me, I'm so old, I don't know what that is. But you said they would transcribe something, and I wasn't sure how that was saved or processed if they're not notating anything.
Got it. I think if I remember correctly from that assignment, and I hope you'll understand too, I had to change some of these assignments and things to fit on the slides. What they would do is these processes go on for weeks, some of these prompts. Earlier weeks, they were transcribing it on paper and doing that as another way to get familiar with more traditional notation, and also to sort of dip their toes into chant notation. But the mashup itself, which was the final project of sort of this 3-week arc, was no written notation. Everything was just going to be digital. So there is some notation in the way of like visual notation, I would suppose. They were using Soundtrap, but it moved away from like writing things down at that point.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just seeing the chat screen now, so I'm trying to see if.
And those just came in, so if you wanna kind of dovetail into that, or we're at that slide. Okay.
Yeah, it's time. Yeah, it's 15 minutes left, so I'd love to stop doing as much talking. And yes, iconic notation is, yeah. I'm seeing iconic notation. I would say we do that too.
So I think Stephen Keys has a question. as far as the use of technology and not traditional composition? Is this just meeting the kids where they are at and just to get them creating?
That's a great question. Thank you, Stephen. And thanks for also mentioning about the soft deadlines on that too. I agree. Sometimes it could be if it was a class where, I mean, I think there's differences in the types of classes you're teaching, right? Is it a general class in the sense that like students are doing it for graduation credit, or is it someone who's trying to have a several year arc in music? Is it someone who arrives with a lot of sort of formal experience in music? But no, I mean, I feel like digital work, just like composition, is part of what we do. I think technology and digital composition is just part of what we do. And I think it's a skill that all students can benefit from, regardless of their previous experiences or interests. I hope that answered it. Thanks, Stephen. Let's see if I can go to grid view so I can see people. Cool. So I'm happy to questions or hear other people's ideas. That would be great. Agree, disagree?
Should we, back at your slide about the kinds of activities and the venues, maybe we should bring, I want to pause before our webinar is over with. I want to make sure that we acknowledge that we have both our president of CMEA, Armelin De La O. She is on this session. She is in Hawaii right now. We have our past president, Mr. John Byrne, not in Hawaii. We also have President-elect Ann Fennell on this webinar. We also have CMEA North Coast Section President, Holly McDonald. I guess I do something around here. So I'm your Vice President for CMEA, as well as your host this afternoon. So I just want to make sure we acknowledge everyone. Now I can't think of the question. Oh, so back to the venue pieces. Should we share? I know Ann wouldn't mind this. Should we share the performance venue? We talked about. Ann, do you want to talk about the Apple Store? If she's.
I'm here. Yeah, it's just that between my dog and everything else around, my earbuds are out. Yeah, so I was able to work with my local Apple Store, and I did it for 10 years, where I spoke with the manager and said, hey, can we have a walk-in gallery in your store for all my music composition students? Because I had 4 different classes of like 35 each every term. And so he said, sure, what does that look like? And I said, well, 2 students, 1 computer. I would take their folders in advance. I load them in. They would play their piece. We got to the point where they were playing screenshots and MP3s because they didn't have all the music sounds that we had at home, and that would glitch it up. So the screenshots of key points, plus that would drive their direction because they'd also present. They would have a written portion. They would write about the elements of music or the practice of composition, whatever level they were on, depending on the class. And they would talk about how and why they composed it, a focused area of listening for them. And then they would show the key screenshots that reflected the presentation, and then they play the piece. And then I would have little cheat sheets of the elements of music and, tension and practices of composition, like tension, release, motion, stasis, things like that. So then parents could look at those words and reflect back and go, oh, so tell me more about the beat and what did you hear? And they would really talk and engage with the composer at every section. It was cool. And then they would go off and listen to others. We would be there about an hour for each section. I'd break up each class into 45 minutes to an hour a piece, because it took about 50 minutes for every parent group to go around. We'd bring about, oh my God, like 100 people to the Apple Store for each of those. The manager loved it. We'd go every fall.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Chatting about that yesterday, and yeah.
I'm going to do that someday. That's a great idea. I would be amiss. I also want to thank Dr. Lisa Crawford for being on this session. She is the CMEA Creating a Composition representative. We have also Emma Jolene Schaffler from our CMEA General Music representative. Woo! This is the Emma Jolene. Yeah. Yes, I think I did everyone here. Okay. Are there any other questions that we have for Michael, for the group, for the good of the order? I'd like to welcome, so we have someone from out of state today. Mr. Stephen Keys is coming to us from Kentucky. Stephen, say hi. Well, he'll see this back on the recording.
Hi, from Kentucky. How are you guys? Hey, guys. I love the fact that you guys are doing this for your teachers.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
We can.
Okay. Yeah, I just love the fact that you've put all this series together for your teachers. It is something that I'm hoping to borrow and talk to the leaders in our state about doing the same thing, especially with the situations that we're in right now. We could all use a little more support. So thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for joining.
All right. We have about 10 minutes left, or I mean, we're about there, but so we will have a recording of this webinar. So please feel free to share once we had it processed and put up on the CASMIC website as well as our CMEA website. I see our executive administrator is back. So thank you for all of the work that Trish Adams has done behind the scenes, not in front out here, but so important to our work. Thank you, Trish. And once again, let's give Dr. Michael Albertson a round of applause. Thank you for sharing today, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chad and Trish and Armelin and everybody. Dr. C, I see you.
All right. Well, everyone, it seems like across our state that we are enjoying the. Oh, thank you. We had a quick question come in before we hop off here. Michael, we have a question. Michael, your students are 7th to 11th graders?
Yeah, this year it's 6th to 11th this year, and then we'll reach our 12th grade class next year.
Oh, right, absolutely.
Do you do different things with the younger ones versus the older ones? Are we seeing examples that are kind of across grade levels, or how does that interact?
Thank you so much for mentioning that. It's funny you say that, and I'm like, of course I forgot to talk about that. Most of almost all my experience has been with high schoolers. I mean, I feel like I've tried these things with different age students, and I would imagine the guidelines or the different things we would be doing would be a little different. But if it's okay with you, I would love to ask Lisa to, we can unmute Lisa and have her join, because she works primarily with our middle school students. And we coordinate our composition together.
Yeah, Armelin, it's a great question, because the older you get in our program, you're doing different things for sure. We have a recording studio in our school, so by the time you're in high school, music production is a very important aspect of our program, and that is a wonderful opportunity for our students. At the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade levels, we do very different things. 8th grade is theater and music. It's a fantastic opportunity for kids to compose music that has a whole lot of different things, reasons, ideas, and it's not all about adding music to theater either. So 6th graders do a whole lot with music first, and 7th graders do much more challenging projects with music first. So they compose for one term per year, and my focus, as everybody here knows, is composing, songwriting, all kinds of sound designs, and sharing formally your presentation is one of our biggest goals for students at Geffen Academy.
And I would say that, Lisa, I think the essence of the assignments we give students is the same, in terms of we try to design them the same way, in terms of with middle school or high school, trying to incorporate the new idea or whatever, but then leaving enough room for creativity. I mean, when I was doing the middle school courses 2 years ago, I think, I mean, I would give a little more guidance to the middle schoolers just based on the age and give them a little more structure. And then, you know, we might not dive into some of the protest material as deeply with 6th graders as I would with 11th graders. We might talk about it in different ways. But I think the essence of what we do is pretty similar.
In middle school, you start to learn how you change sound. So that is a precursor to the music production that the older you get, you're able to do more and more of.
And Kirk, thanks for your question. I see, and Chad sent you a resource. We use Noteflight too. I like Noteflight for students of all levels of composition. My students in the advanced class are doing 12-tone row compositions, something, you know, very traditional out of Western music. And then students next week in a songwriting class who don't really deal with traditional notation so much are learning how to harmonize melodies and thirds, and just being able to like see the notes and the relationship between the notes, and just being able to hear it back and do it, transpose parts for different instruments. So
that resource, Kirk, is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many ideas once you're in the sort of Noteflight Learn accounts, so many glossaries, user content generated. Yeah. So
that's what I've been finding. It's not overwhelming, but there's so much that it's hard to know kind of where to start.
Sure.
That first one, the one I'm talking about that Ann and Mike, John gave was like pretty cool, but man, even that's a year's worth right there. So it's interesting.
They make some great, their YouTube channel, they make some great tutorials too. Please go check those out as well.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Let me see here. So please feel free as I'm talking if something comes to mind. We just want to preview next week. So our next Friday, we have online ensemble instruction, bridging the digital divide and flattening the learning curve, presented by Zach Pitt-Smith and Jessica Husselstein. And so those are two of our CMEA state board representatives, and they will be presenting on that next Friday, same time, same channel. Not quite the same channel, but I just wanted to say that. But please feel free to register for that at all of the webinars over at our CASMIC partner site, where not only if you could take a look at ours, but you could take a look at California choral directors, California band directors. There's something every single day. So without much further ado, we're going to call it, we're going to end this session today. But like I was saying earlier, it seems like the state of California is in a wonderful sort of sunshiny place. Even Holly, did the fog go away in North Coast? Yeah, see, it's perfectly sunny in Eureka, Arcata.
It's gorgeous. Look at the blue sky.
So let's go enjoy some outdoor activities as much as
Thank you, Mike.
thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Thanks so much.